Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we're going to be going to Canada this evening, to New Brunswick, in fact. So, yes, do say hello in the chat box. Say where you're joining us from this evening. It's always good fun to know. And indeed, it'll be interesting to see if anybody joins us from New Brunswick itself. So do say hello. And indeed, if you have been to New Brunswick, let us know that as well. We always want to know. So hello, everybody. Hello to Richard in Portugal, Sheila in Teddington, Kerry in Pentridge, Colin in Bournemouth, first in, Maureen from Cheltenham, and Cliff in Worcester, Rebecca in Manchester, John in Windsor. Hi, John, just where I am as well. Lucy in Harrogate, Jackie in Ashstead. So, oh dear, Jacqueline in rainy Telford. Yes, I think it's raining in Windsor as well. Hello to Neil in Dublin and Lucy in Bristol. And hello, Barry and Yvonne from Warwick. Lovely that you can join us tonight. So, yeah, it's a bit of a filthy evening out there, I think. So I hope you're comfortable. And hello to Engar. Apologies if I've got your name pronounced wrong, but welcome, joining us from Pakistan. So delighted you're joining us. Steve in Reading, lovely. Julia in Wales, and Nicholas in a very dark and wet Acton. Anne in Barstow, she loved her visit to New Brunswick and the Bay of Fundy. So great that we've got at least one person here tonight who's already been. Keith in Surrey, Rosalind in Margate, and Lenny and Catherine in Falkirk. Welcome all, and we're going to be transporting you to New Brunswick this evening, finding out so much more about it. And this, I think, New Brunswick, I think everybody will agree, really is a real undiscovered gem. And I know that's a phrase that used too much, but it really is. Hello to Christine in BC, Ashley in Nevada. And Jackie said she was in the Bay of Fundy many years ago. And Evelyn says hello from a freezing Perthshire. Yes, well, gosh. Well, I think we're going to, as I say, transport you this evening, take you away to somewhere with vast forests, rugged beaches, wildlife-filled islands, fascinating history, whales. I know we're definitely going to see lots of whales. And of course, New Brunswick's also home to one of the world's most extraordinary natural phenomena. And if you don't know what that is, I'm sure we're going to be hearing all about it. Hello to Scott in Florida, Susan in Montreal, but you've lived in New Brunswick, so it'd be great to get your tips. And Brent from Cambridge. So welcome all. And I think we should probably trying to move things on, and I'll introduce our great panel tonight because we've got some great talks lined up. So joining us all the way from New Brunswick, we have Allison Ayton, who is the Manager of Industry and Travel Media Relations for Tourism New Brunswick. Now, excuse me, I've got a very bad throat tonight, as I know Phoebe has as well. So sorry about that. So Allison was born and raised in New Brunswick, beautiful riverside capital of Fredericton. And so few people know more about what makes the province special than Allison. So welcome, Allison. And what time is it there?
Oh, it's only 2:00 in the afternoon here, so I'm ready to go, guys.
Yeah, this is it. You're full of energy, you know, whereas we're all thinking about the evening ahead. Oh, Julie Dick says, because I'm going to introduce Phoebe now, and Julie Dick says, "Is there anywhere Phoebe hasn't been?" Phoebe Smith, is there anywhere you haven't been yet?
Many places.
So Phoebe is an award-winning travel writer, photographer, presenter and broadcaster, and she specialises in adventure, the outdoors and wildlife conservation. And Phoebe's host of a multi-award winning Wonder Woman podcast, and she's author of just the 10 books to date, which include the best-selling Travel Writer's Field Guide, Extreme Sleeps, Adventures of a Wild Camper and Wilderness Weekends. So, yes, Phoebe really does get around in the nicest possible way. So, welcome back, Phoebe. Great to have you here. And then, very excited to welcome for the first time to a Wanderlust event, Simon Barnes. Hello, Simon.
G'day, Lynn. G'day, everybody.
Yes. So, in fact, Simon and I first met in Baja, California, didn't we? So
we did. We met over a hot whale.
We did indeed. So Simon's been writing about wildlife since he first encountered grey whales while covering the Super Bowl of 1988. Because if some of you Brits recognise his name, of course, Simon used to very much be a very well-known sports correspondent for the Times. Anyway, but wildlife is his big passion. So he's written many books on the subject, including the Bad Birdwatcher trilogy, Rewild Yourself, and most recently, The History of the World in 100 Animals. And he's also a council member for the World Land Trust. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we've got Andy Austin. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Hello. Andy's the product manager for Canada at Wexus Travel, which is a great travel company. And New Brunswick is just one of many places that they cover in the world. Andy's worked there for almost 10 years. And in fact, he's got 25 years experience in the travel industry. And Andy most recently visited New Brunswick in 2018, where he enjoyed whale watching from St. Andrews and walking on the ocean floor, yes, at the Hopewell Rocks in the Bay of Fundy. So brilliant. So Andy's going to be very much answering any questions you've got tonight on practical issues of, going out and having a brilliant trip to New Brunswick. And so do feel free to ask questions in the chat box during the evening. And we will have a Q&A after our speakers, which Andy will join us for. And we can quiz him more then about how to actually go and do it. So I think that is our introductions done. We are recording this evening. So if for any reason you're interrupted or do have to leave early, then don't worry. We will be sending out a follow-up with a recording of this evening. And any questions we don't get to answer this evening, we will try and answer them in that follow-up as well. As I say, do use the chat box through the evening, ask your questions so I can get a note of them ready to ask our speakers in the Q&A. Right, so I think without further ado, we should probably get on. So we are going to be hearing from Allison first, who's going to give us an introduction to the province. But to get us in the mood, why don't we see a video first?
This is a call to come find yourself again. It's a call of the wild. A call to the part of you that longs to wander and to roam. This is the road less traveled. Time well spent. This is where you get to be yourself, because we'd never want you to be any other way. This is a reminder to live, to laugh, and witness the world through childlike eyes. This is where time seems to slow, and where a moment can last a lifetime. This is a people and a place waiting to welcome you with open arms. It's our welcoming nature, New Brunswick.
Great. So that video was just to give you a little taste of a little bit everywhere in the province, even though tonight I know we're really focused on the Bay of Fundy. And I know that Phoebe and Simon will be speaking a lot more about that later. So for those of you that aren't aware of where New Brunswick is, we're on the eastern seaboard of Canada. So probably the closest point, one of the closest points to the UK. And the best way to get here is obviously flying. We don't have, unfortunately, any direct flights from the UK into New Brunswick, but we do have really great connections through Toronto and Montreal. So it would be just a quick layover and then hop right into one of our three main cities of Fredericton, which is the capital, Moncton, or St. John. Or you can also fly into Halifax, and those also offer connections, or you can rent a car and do a road trip into New Brunswick from Nova Scotia. So all really great options. Another nice way to visit New Brunswick is via cruise ship. So the city of St. John, which is right on the Bay of Fundy, it actually hosts cruise ships that come up the eastern seaboard and through New England, and also visits other parts of Atlantic Canada during the fall colors. So anyone that's interested in seeing beautiful fall foliage and visiting New Brunswick at the same time, that's a really great way to visit the province. But I'm going to focus on the Fundy Coast because, as I mentioned, Simon and Phoebe both are going to talk about their experiences here. So this just shows you where the Fundy Coast is. It's along the bottom half of the province. And, you know, we're known for a lot of things. We're Canada's only bilingual province officially, so you'll find some French speakers and English speakers. We're known, you saw from the video, all the trees were 83% covered in forest. So anyone that's into forest bathing after this last year, we offer some really great opportunities to get out and hike and explore. You know, we have amazingly warm salt water, the warmest salt water beaches north of Virginia, actually. But what we're really the best known for is the highest tides in the world all along the Fundy Coast. And they range from anywhere from 8 meters in height down around St. Andrews, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen, to about 14 meters at the Hopewell Rocks. And so a little road trip all along the Fundy Coast really gives you a great opportunity to experience what each of these crazy tidal ranges has to offer. So the first couple slides here, this is Campobello Island, and I know both Phoebe and Simon, I believe, have visited Campobello. It's home to Roosevelt International Park, which is home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, former U.S. president. It was his summer home, and is a really fabulous island. There's some amazing whale watching opportunities off the coast of this island as well. We'll also be touching on Grand Manan. This is the Swallowtail Lighthouse that you see as you come in via ferry into Grand Manan. Grand Manan also offers some excellent seabirding options if you're an avid bird watcher, and also more whale watching options. This is down, of course, along the lower tidal ranges, but these extreme tides are what really attract the whales to this area. If you prefer to do your whale watching from the mainland, St. Andrews by the Sea is our New England style resort town. So this is actually a photo of the Algonquin Resort. It's a Marriott autograph property. It's the only one in the province, and has long been a popular spot for, you know, wealthy Americans coming up. They thought that the Bay of Fundy had healing properties because of the salt in the water and the amazing tides and things like that. So this town is made for visitors and is one of our top whale watching areas. Continuing along the coast, I mentioned the city of St. John earlier. This is Canada's oldest incorporated city. It was established, I know not very long ago for those of you from Europe, but established in 1785. And this photo is actually in the city market, which is Canada's oldest continuing market. The architecture throughout the town is amazing. It's a great spot to base yourself if you're looking, you know, for brand name hotels or wonderful B&Bs. They also have an excellent food scene, particularly local food, being right on the ocean. The lobster, scallops, mussels, all the options are unreal. So definitely a stop in St. John is worth your time. And then not too far outside of St. John, and this is one of the wonderful things, St. John's the only city on the Bay of Fundy, but it's very, very close to nature. This shot is actually in St. Martin's, which is a little town about a 20-minute drive outside the city. And those sea caves at high tide actually fill up with water. And you can go kayaking into them to explore them. But at low tide, they actually offer meals in a sea cave on the ocean floor. So a really kind of cool way to experience the tidal differences in that area. And St. Martin's is also the start of our newest attraction, which is called the Fundy Trail Parkway. So this is really, they completed it this past year. It just opened in September. And essentially it connects the town of St. Martin's with another town called Alma on the other end of it. And this whole area was a completely, or well, still is, except for the road, a completely undeveloped piece of coastline. It's the last undeveloped piece of coastline between Labrador and Florida on the eastern seaboard of North America. and is actually home to 2 UNESCO designations. It hosts some parts of the UNESCO Global Geopark called Stonehammer, and it also is home to some pieces of the UNESCO Fundy Biosphere Reserve. So if you're into UNESCO sites, this is a great destination. There's some amazing lookouts. You can go hiking. There's tons of great day hikes. There's also a multi-day hike through here. One of North America's top 50 trails goes through this area. It's called the Fundy Footpath. So this whole kind of park area is a really spectacular spot and one not to be missed when you're in the region. And as I mentioned, it connects into Alma, which is also home to Fundy National Park. So this is a shot in the national park. So the park is right along the coastline as well. And actually the last little piece connects directly into the park and then into the town of Alma. And here's just a shot of some of the scenery you might see in Alma. It's a fishing village. So if you're there in October when they have setting day, when they go out for lobster fishing, you can see the fleet head out. It's really an amazing sight. And as you see at low tide, these boats sit right on the ocean floor. And then at high tide, and I don't have a photo at high tide, but they're bobbing in the water right alongside the wharf. So clearly they wait for the tide to come back in before they head out fishing. But this is just an example of some of the things you'll see along the way. And then what we're best known for and where you see the biggest change in the tides is right here at the Hopewell Rocks. Here you'll see up to a 14-meter tide difference, which is essentially a three-story building. And what's really great is at high tide, you can kayak in and around these rocks, get right into some of those nooks and crannies. And at low tide, I've done it before, you actually can see people walking where you were kayaking earlier. So it's very, very evident the tidal difference. And the nice thing is they actually give you a 48-hour pass when you pay to enter the Hopewell Rocks. And so you can come back at high and low tide and see them both and see the difference in the space. I'll leave you with that. This is just a great photo, one of my favorites of some of the seabirds. These are puffins. You probably all have seen them before, but you can visit these off the coast of Grand Manan on a small disputed island called Machaya Seal Island. And you have to book that one well in advance, but I'm sure Andy would be happy to tell you how to do that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Allison. And that was really enticing. And I think what did catch my imagination as well was about the road trip element. So we'll ask you a bit more about that, I think, in the questions, because that will be good to know about that. And also perhaps to get a feeling of the size, really. But anyway, let's save that for the Q&A. We'll pick up on that then. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Great. Right, yes, I did like the look of the new Fundy Trail Parkway. That's very enticing. So, welcome back, Simon. So, yay, really looking forward to this. So, I'm going to leave you to it.
There are occasions, rare and unforgettable, when the universe dances for you, when it seems that the whole of the wild world has but one purpose in mind, and that is to bring you joy. The ballet of nature is not something you witness every day, yet it came to me twice in a single week in the Bay of Fundy in Canada when I travelled there 2 years ago. In one of the ballets, the dancers were very small indeed, birds the size of a sparrow or less, each one weighing no more than 3-pound coins, 3 quids worth of beauty that created something to dazzle the richest person in the world. I saw 35,000 of these birds all dancing at the same time, and almost danced for joy myself. The second troupe of dancers was made of more substantial individuals, 9 humpback whales huddled and cuddled together in a great raft of sociability, the biggest more than 50 feet long and weighing 45 tons. That's more than £500,000 coins, and worth every penny. These ballets take place because the Bay of Fundy is unique. It has the highest tidal range in the world. Numbers won't really help you to get it, so let's say you were able to build a 4-story house at low water mark. 6 hours and 13 minutes later, the entire structure would be underwater. I was shown a video of 3 rangers from the Hopewell Rocks Park, a place with a series of beaches apparently designed by Salvador Dali. The feet of the rangers were anchored to the floor, and they stood there dry-shod as the tide came in. Just 27 minutes later, the water was up to the chin of the woman in the middle. My guide, Alain Chavette, once miscalculated time and place, distracted by his delight in the wonderful seabirds of the bay. The memory still chills him. He was lucky to escape with his life. This extraordinary tidal range is the result of the funnel shape of the bay and the immense depth of the water it contains. The length of the bay means that the natural sloshing of the water, like water in a bathtub after you've made a wave with your hands, coincides with the rising and falling tide. So here we have a place of extremes. Twice a day, the same place is either dry land or deep sea. The Bay of Fundy is on the bit of Canada that's nearest to Britain. The land part sticks out into the Atlantic from the eastern edge of the continent. I devoted myself to the further shore of the bay in the state of New Brunswick, and Lord, they do space in New Brunswick. 700,000 people share 28,000 square miles. A city dweller must change place. You have to say hello to strangers for a start. The bay itself is 94 miles long and 32 miles wide at the mouth. Colossal, incomprehensible masses of water wash in and wash out to the rhythm of the tides, up to 70 feet vertically, temporarily exposing areas up to 3 miles wide. That's 3 miles of seabed you can walk on, at least if you happen to be a bird. Now, I have a task on my hand, an ambition to get all of you taking part in this event to get excited about semi-palmated sandpipers. I accept that this is a challenge. You may not immediately thrill to the idea of a bird that's not even fully palmated. To tell the truth, I was not overexcited about semi-palmated sandpipers before I set out, and I'm a birder. Perhaps my greatest joy in life is wildlife. Semi-palmated sandpipers nest in the Arctic, and they winter in Suriname and French Guiana. All the same, the Bay of Fundy is essential to them. They spend 2 or 3 weeks there every year, and for them, the bay is life and death. It is the place that makes their extravagant, far-ranging lifestyle possible. And it's about mud. Now, I accept I may have a still harder job getting you excited about mud, but for semi-palmated sandpipers, for any shorebird, mud is the most exciting stuff in the world. And that's because it's full, absolutely jam-packed with small worms and other tiny creatures, things that sandpipers call food. So, when the low tide uncovers the vast areas of mud that march 3 miles out across the bay, it's feeding time. And they feed all right and all night. Whenever the mud is uncovered and the sea goes away, these birds will be out there in thousands, filling their boots. You can see them often at a distance, scarcely distinguishable as birds, for it looks as if the mud itself was creepily and disturbingly in motion. In the short time they spend in the bay, they will double and treble their weight. And when they're ready, crammed full of the great reserves of energy they got from beneath the mud of the bay, they fly. They fly across the sea. They fly down to South America, and they don't do so overland, hugging the coast and stopping for rests, but over the open ocean. That's commitment for you. They must do it all in one go or perish. It takes at least 72 hours of non-stop flying. The only reason they can make it is the immense mud-covered riches of the Bay of Fundy. It follows that while they're still on the bay, they are eager, even desperate, to feed. When the tide is high and they're pushed off the mud, they get tense and restless, waiting for the chance to start loading up again. And so, as the mud starts to uncover again, they dance. Sometimes the dances are set off by a visiting bird of prey that alarms them. Sometimes there seems no reason at all other than their own impatience. But they dance, flying this way and that, all together, and never for a second colliding. You'll have seen films of a starling murmuration, oozing, shape-shifting clouds of birds, all apparently moving as if every move was long practice, as if one mind controlled the entire flock. The semi-palmated sandpipers of the Bay of Fundy do the same thing, but better. Better because there are often many more of them, and better because of the extraordinary, melodramatic nature of the scenery. The birds are darkish on top and palish underneath, and as they change direction, all in gorgeous synchronicity, they're first a white flock and then a black flock, so it's like stroking velvet. They make shapes and then they make different shapes, the shrill sound of their piping, the whir of their wings, and it's a poor person who doesn't want to cheer and cheer again with each spectacular new formation. On my last day in the bay, I took a boat from Grand Manan, an island towards the mouth of the bay, and from there we set off in the general direction of the Atlantic, looking to see what the sea might show us. That's when we found those humpbacks. I can still hear the sound of them, still hear and see that breathtaking breath, 9 breathtaking breaths that filled the sea from one horizon to the other, reminding us that despite our differences, we're all mammals together. Everyone needs to see great whales. For me, my first time grey whales in California was a life-changing experience, resulting in a decision to write about wildlife. It is the devastating mixture of magic and humdrum that does it. The appearance of a great whale from the ocean is the most marvellous conjuring trick you will ever see, a monster rabbit emerging from a horizon-filling hat. But the immense sound of the breath, audible for a mile all around, is a reminder that the miracle they are performing is one you are doing yourself, a dozen or more times a minute, though probably at least twice that, when you see one of these marvellous monsters come to the surface and blow. Here are creatures that are obviously alien, and yet at the same time, the vast amount we have in common is even more obvious. The truth we learn so dramatically about whales is true about us and everything else that lives. We're all connected, we all share the same air and the same planet, and we all have an equal interest in maintaining the planet as an effective, living and life-giving organism. And then the whales turned to go, and it was heads down, tails up, one after the other, as if in a dance long rehearsed and years ago perfected. Each vast tail, one after the other, made a great Y in the sky, another cue for an involuntary cheer torn from the throat of each observer. And one after the other, they sounded, diving deep to feed on the riches that the bay brings in and out again with the great unstoppable tides. This is an easy, undemanding place. I stayed mostly at little family-run places where the echoes of ancient traditions of hospitality can still be found. Wooden-built houses of a certain age, rooms with a stress on comfort rather than grandeur. Wherever you go, you find yourself having conversations. You find your traditional British reserve has been confiscated by the customs on entry. Alain, my guide, is of Acadian extraction, the French people who first cultivated the land and were then driven off by the British under the General Robert Monckton in the 18th century. The town of Monckton in New Brunswick still bears his name. At the top end of the bay, the Acadian stronghold, you will see many flags, the French tricolour bearing a gold star. Alain, though deeply aware of his heritage, showed no inclination to blame me for ancient history. In fact, we had a blast, talking birds, talking wildlife, finding time for the occasional beer, looking out over the waters of the bay, wondering what wonders lay beneath and what we might see the following day. And there were plenty of these high-speed runs over the water to try and find more whales, a distant humpback emerging from the water backwards, slamming his tail down to make a splash I could hear a mile off, the little jewels of New World warblers filling the trees like Christmas decorations, and the search for a moose that yielded the freshest of footprints, but alas, no moose. But that's wildlife for you. It ain't tame. You come away from a good trip, and when people ask you what was good, you tend to say, well, everything. But when you're pressed to give an example of what was special, you remember what went especially deep. And I'll not forget the bay of the two ballets, tiny birds facing an enormous journey, and enormous whales with breath that fill the sky.
Oh, Simon, thank you so much for that. Oh gosh, what wonderful, beautiful words. I mean, you really transported us all
Don't
there,
thank
I
me,
think.
thank the whales and the sandpipers.
Okay, the raw ingredients were there, we admit it. I mean, I think we're going to probably in the Q&A talk a bit more about best times to go, but when were you there? When is the best time, do you know, to see whales and to see birds?
The semi-palmated sandpipers is a pretty small window to get, and I'm trying to remember when that was. Allison will know better than I do, but I think it was late August, maybe early September. It's the end of the breeding season. Allison?
It's late August. You're right. Yeah.
It's the end of they started breeding, and it starts to get cold. And I believe it does get cold occasionally in Canada, so they fly off to escape that.
Okay, great. Well, that was absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again in the Q&A.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Right, welcome, Phoebe.
Thanks, Lynn.
And I know you fell in love with this place. I know you had an amazing trip. So really looking forward to this. I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. You'll have to excuse my husky voice, but I actually feel it's very appropriate because I could listen to Simon Barnes talk all evening. He's got such a beautiful lyrical voice. So at least I'm bringing a bit of interest to tonight's talk, I think, with my sore throat. But anyway, New Brunswick on the tail of the whale. So yeah, Lynn's right. I went there because it's one of the best places in the world to perhaps catch sight of the endangered North Atlantic right whale. And so that was kind of what took me there most recently. I just wanted to show you this picture. So this is a picture showing the lengths, the literal lengths I will go to watching wildlife. So my tent is the green one hanging down from these sea cliffs in Scotland at a place called Strathy Point. And I was there to spy some grey seals, as well as doing a bit of a charity fundraiser with an extreme sleeve out. But yeah, it was the perfect way to watch grey seals in the ocean. But you will all be pleased to know that you don't have to go to these kind of lengths to see whales and sea life in Canada, particularly when you head to New Brunswick. But before I go into the hunt for the whales that I was on, I wanted to explain why New Brunswick in particular is such a special place for me. So for all, we had the comment at the earlier in this talk saying that had I been everywhere, I really, really have not been everywhere. But I do have special connections to some places, and New Brunswick is the place where my best friend when I was 14, she and her family left North Wales where I grew up and actually moved to New Brunswick. And I desperately wanted to go out and see her. And actually, I think she's watching tonight or will watch it later. She lives in New Brunswick still now. And it was the first place when I turned 19, first time I'd been on holiday without any family. And so I went there to go see her, and I realised what a special place it was. And I realised also how little known it was back then, especially when I went to the travel agent and she tried to sell me flights to St. John's in Newfoundland rather than St. John, New Brunswick. And that a bit of a conversation ensued to tell her where exactly I needed to go. So, of course, when I went to go see my friend Claire, most of the trip was about sightseeing, seeing her, shopping, visiting the downtown. There was lots of food, drink, music, the market square. And we also went to this place called Reversing Falls, which you can see photographed. So Reversing Falls is a place where there's a series of rapids on the St. John River, which runs through a narrow gorge before it empties out into the Bay of Fundy, which we all keep talking about, which of course we know is home to the highest tides in the world. Because of those tides, the flow of water is actually forced to reverse against the prevailing current when the tide is high. So these rapids, or falls as they're called, are created by a series of underwater ledges that you can't actually see, and they kind of roll the water in different directions. So it does look like they're going backwards and forwards. When I went and saw the Reversing Falls, which was probably the memory that sticks with me the most, I did also go visit somewhere else in the town of St. John, the capital of the province, and it was the museum that was there. And I didn't know it then, But it obviously had planted a seed in my head that began to germinate many years later. And that is that in the museum, there is a skull of a North Atlantic right whale called Delilah. And there's also examples of her baleen. So obviously North Atlantic right whales feed on crustaceans, they're filter feeders. And she's hung up there, absolutely huge. It gives you a real sense of how big these whales are. And she is there because she actually washed up on the shores of Grand Manan Island within the Fundy Isles in 1992 after being struck by a ship. And it turns out that I wasn't the only one to have seen Delilah and had an encounter with her that would sort of plant something in my head. The other person it had a massive impact in is this lady, and her name is Moira Brown. Now, Moira Brown stood next to her. She didn't even really come to my chin. She was quite a petite lady, but she has done something absolutely massive when it comes to wildlife conservation. She managed to campaign and actually work with mariners and the fishing industry to move an entire fishing lane and shipping lane, that would all these big cargo ships would cut through, and that's where most of the ship strikes were happening. She went to New Brunswick. She's actually American originally. She went to New Brunswick to study seabirds. But she said she caught the right whale bug, and mainly because so little is known about them. People don't know why they have these calicites, which they're recognizable for on their head. They don't really know where the majority of the population migrate to. And there would have at one time been thousands in the water. They were actually named right whales because they were seen as the right size to hunt. And when they were harpooned, they would float handily on the surface, so they'd be very easy to drag into the ships. Once there would have been thousands, the sea would have been full of them. But right now, there's just over 400. So they are critically endangered. But it's her work that has really worked to help protect them. And I met her at a place called Campobello Island. Now, Campobello is one of the 3 Isles of Fundy. It sits at the head of a place called Passamaquoddy Bay, which is named after the First Nations people who once lived there. And it's about a 2-hour drive from St. John, the capital. It's accessed by, you can get the ferry from the mainland to Deer Island and then get another one onto Campobello. But when I was there, you had to do a drive because the ferry wasn't operating because there was a few problems. And you actually had to drive into Maine, USA, to then go to a place called Lubeck and then take a bridge over. And it's one of these places that's kind of famed for its walking trails. It's obviously beach because it's an island. And it's also a house where Franklin D. Roosevelt used to holiday. And therefore, it's only the only US-Canada maintained museum that you'll find anywhere. And for me, I love that that was my first introduction to the island because it showed this real sense of people working together for a greater good. And that is why looking after the whales, as people do in New Brunswick, has really worked well. A great example was seen when I went out. So I booked on several trips to go whale watching when I was on Campobello. And these 2 guys were on all of them. So you can see on the right, there's a guy called Mackie Green. And on the left is a guy called Robert Fitzsimmons. So Mackie is one of the most respected whale watching guides that you'll find on Campobello Island. And he was a fisherman by trade. And then in 1995, when the fishing industry started drying up, he got a grant from the government to try something else. And he decided to try whale watching. And he said to me, everyone laughed when I did it, but they're not laughing now because he's gone on to have, like I said, the most well-established and well thought of whale watching companies on the island. And with him was Robert. You can see Robert's got a tool in his hand there. And that's because both Robert and Mackie are on something called Campobello Whale Rescue. So these are a team of all volunteers, mainly fishermen and whale watch guides, who, if someone reports seeing a whale that's trapped in some kind of netting or fishing equipment or is in some kind of distress, they will call the Campobello Whale Rescue and they will actually go out to try and save them. And I actually got to see a little bit of this conservation in action completely by chance on one of the days I was there. When we were going past, this is a herring weir, which is where they collect the herring fish that kind of funnel in and can't quite find their way out of these. And you can see that's a minke whale that was in there. Now, this minke whale was not in any great distress. We had a whale watching expert on board who was saying he's absolutely having the time of his life because, of course, he was in a pen essentially full of food and eating all the herring that the fishermen wanted to capture and bring in the next day. But it was great because I got to see Mackie and Robert spring into action and talk about what they were going to do and how they were going to resolve the situation. And sure enough, a couple of days after I left, they sent me a message to say the whale was really completely belly. So they give themselves to these animals. And there really is a sacrifice there. The year that I went, which I think is the same as Simon, 2018, one of their friends on the whale rescue, Joe Howlett, had sadly died trying to free a whale. And when you ask these guys about, did it ever make you feel you should quit doing this? They said, well, no, Joe would haunt us if we did. And they said one of the best things was that even though Joe sadly lost his life, that whale lived because of him freeing it from a net that it got caught in, and it couldn't breathe. So these are really dedicated people, dedicated to the cause of the wonderful wildlife. So over the few days that I was on the island, I, like Simon, got to see a lot of seabirds, harbour porpoises, which they also call the puffing pig because they make a sound like a puffing pig sound, harbour seals and greys, even a basking shark saw on one of the trips there. But finally, on one of the days, you'll notice a bit of the fog here, the Fundy fog came in. I got to see something I'd come for, and that was a whale. So this is a humpback whale in the fog, and you'll hear people in New Brunswick fondly talk about the Fundy fog, and that's because a huge volume of the North Atlantic Ocean air, it rushes, well, the sea rushes in and out of it 2 times a day. And as it crashes into these islands, Fundy Islands, so Campobello, Grand Manan and Deer Island, it's mixed and sort of turned upside down, and it creates this very cold water that creates the fog that you see. And the reason and I actually read a very interesting fact that the foghorn was invented in New Brunswick. And it's easy to see why when you go there and see this, but it really hits you as this is beautiful and really part of the personality of the place. And it's also helped create this wonderful ground for things like the porpoises and like the whales. So seeing this humpback was really just the beginning. The encounters got closer. You'd see the blows come up. You'd get there. You'd see them doing all kinds of moves. You'd see them fluking. You'd see them lunge feeding. So when they go for a feed and all the water spills out of them. Then they got really close. You can see this on Mackie's radar. That's actually the shape of one of the humpbacks underneath our hull, literally resting there, until one emerged a little bit too close, and that was all I could get a picture of. And this is what they did. They would just suddenly emerge in a splash. We had a pair that accompanied us for several hours. This was taken not even using a long lens. This was of its blow, and you can see the stove bolts on its back. And even the weather got clearer and more beautiful. So it was a spectacular, I think, 4 days I spent doing this whale watching and seeing everything else, all the wildlife. And the night times were something else. They were spent at local restaurants. It was obviously serving seafood. You could listen literally where I was stood there. This was just outside the accommodation that we had. And you could light a fire. We'd sit around drinking beers, sharing our stories. And you could hear the whales blow beneath the cliffs that you were standing on. And you could just listen to them all night. I could even hear them from my bedroom window. I didn't get to see the North Atlantic right whale, which is hardly surprising given their numbers, but it didn't make the experience there any less special, and of course gives me an ideal reason to come back. But the wildlife just doesn't end there. So on land there's plenty as well. This is the town of St Andrews, which, as you can see, is not shy about promoting their proximity to whale experiences. But when I got to St Andrews, I also decided to take a little walk around. And within minutes of leaving the little town centre and going on a walking trail, I saw red squirrels, I saw deer. It really felt like I'd suddenly gone into a very wild place indeed. And there's also somewhere else I'd recommend that you see when you get there, which is called the Huntsman Marine Science Centre. And it's worth dropping in there because these guys have touch pools to kind of show you what lurks under the waters where you've just been spending time on the island, and a real knowledgeable staff to tell you all about it. And they do bird ringing there, and everyone's very, very passionate about the wildlife there as well. Before I went home though on this trip, I'd obviously seen a wealth of big things, of whales, porpoises, of seals, but I wanted to go and check out Fundy National Park. This was my accommodation, which fittingly is a water droplet, as you can see, and it's right in the heart of the forest. It's about an hour's drive from St John. Obviously now a new road is there to give easy access, as we've just heard about. But I wasn't there to rest, of course not. I was there to take part in some citizen science. So what did that look like? Well, it was a slightly smaller species. I was doing a swim with salmon for science. Try and say that a few times fast. And this is an experience that's offered to every man on the street. We can all go and do this. And they do it every year in September time. And basically they're headed up by this guy who's Dr. Kurt Samways, who is the Parks Canada Research Chair in Aquatic Restoration at the University of New Brunswick. Again, try saying that one fast. And what they have there is actually, funny enough, off Grand Manan, so at the Fundy Isles where I just came from, they have the world's first wild conservation farm of Atlantic salmon. And they're desperately trying to repopulate the rivers, get the salmon coming back in, because it's good for the rivers, it's good for the salmon. When Dr. Samways started there in 2016, he said only 13 salmon were coming back to spawn. Since the programme had been going 2 years, when I was there in 2018, they counted that season 52 return. And I just checked in with him before this talk, and in 2021, they reported over 100 salmon returns. So it's working. And you see us here in this picture showing us on this rock the importance of the river health and how the river health relies on having the salmon come in, because they are bringing nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus from the ocean, and they deposit it in the river just by being there, and it creates a much healthier ecosystem. So he was showing us here that invertebrates that are there, such as May and stoneflies, that are only there when water is healthy and clean. So I was like, this is amazing. How can I help? And the answer was, don a dry suit, get in the water and get counting. So what you have to do is zip yourself up in your clothes. It's not a wetsuit. All your clothes stay dry inside it. Put on your mask and snorkel, and you literally are drift snorkeling. So each section of the river, nothing's very scarily long, nothing runs too fast like a rapid. It's not like reversing falls that we saw earlier on. And you basically, as you go, you raise your hand or a finger every time you see a salmon and say how many you've seen. Now it takes a few goes at it. You can see in this picture just how well these salmon blend in, but it's masses of fun, and you get to sort of get your eye in and get to see a bit of what's happening under the water. It's oddly relaxing. I found it very much a stress reliever, and it's a great way to get visitors, of course, to the park engaged with research that they're doing there. And it's been so successful that they hope that the model will be replicated in other parts of the world to get wild salmon back and healthy. So I wanted to end by saying, so why should you go to New Brunswick? I'd say, obviously, one of the things Lynn will attest to is I'm a sucker for a good sunset. So definitely go for the sunsets. This is one of the ones I saw, absolutely stunning. Go for the tides, the highest tide differences in the world. Go for the seafood and go for the wine. It's incredible. The food there was spectacular. Go for the people like Mackie, like Moira, like Robert. Everyone is getting hands-on and doing things. Go for the wildlife. You've heard Simon talking about that and me talking about that. It really is some of the closest encounters that you'll ever have. But above all, go for this often neglected province that I think is just very quietly being awesome, protecting endangered species, both big and small. And for me, that makes it definitely deserving of a visit. Do check out my podcast while I have you to hear more about my adventures, where I highlight unsung destinations and hidden travel heroes around the world, people like Moira and Mackie. And let me know where you get to on your adventures. I hope to hear, of course, that it has been New Brunswick. Thank you very much for listening. I'm glad my voice held up.
Well done, Phoebe. That was great, and and so enticing, and and that so much there. I think as we talked about before, it's just a bit of a hidden gem. Someone asked, what time of year were you there?
So I was end of August into September. I was there for
a similar time to Simon.
Yeah, probably around for sort of 10 days. That's kind of the main, especially because I wanted to do the salmon, swimming salmon for science as well.
Yeah. So Allison, we've had a few questions about best time to go. Now, July and August is presumably the high season. So how busy does it get, and what's it like either side of that?
Well, it depends on what you're going for. So the whales actually really just start becoming abundant in the Bay of Fundy probably the end of July. So if you're looking for a whale experience, those are great right into October. And same thing, you know, obviously if you're looking for, you know, leaf peeping, you know, the leaves changing color and experiencing that kind of season in New Brunswick, late September, early October is wonderful. It gets a little cooler, I'll admit, but you know, it's for a different kind of visitor. If you're looking for a summer visit, July and August are definitely the best times, but you can even come earlier. Things start to open up the third week of May and are open end of May through June, July. And I don't find it's ever too busy unless there's a big event going on or something like that. You can usually find accommodations, squeeze into restaurants. People do their best to make sure that you feel welcome.
Yeah. And what about winter? I mean, is it a place we could visit in winter? Because I think we've been cooped up the last 2 years. We want to go anywhere that'll have us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd be happy to have you in the winter. So we're not a ski destination. We don't have the huge downhill mountains like you would find, you know, out in the western part of Canada or even in Quebec and Ontario. But great cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. We have some, you can do some ice fishing as well. We have some opportunities to do some of that if people are looking to be kind of sporty. We have some amazing outdoor skating trails through the woods in some of our provincial parks. So there's still lots of things. Dog sledding is another one. We offer some dog sledding adventures. So there are great ways to get outside and enjoy the winter as well. I mean, when you have, you know, as many months of winter as we do, you make the most of it.
Yeah. I bet. So, Andy, yeah, we're all excited now. We want to visit. We ring you up. Hey, Andy, we want to visit New Brunswick. What are you going to suggest? Like, how long should we go for? How should we do it?
Well, everyone obviously has a different time scales and different budgets, and we sort of take that and mix it all around and really try to get a focus on what each person wants to get out of the trip. I think going into 2022, there's going to need to be a degree of flexibility because looking at flights are going to be a little bit unpredictable, certainly not necessarily in service, but in terms of price and that sort of thing. So having a degree of flexibility to look around even on a day-to-day basis is going to be a good thing to be looking at. But other than that, yeah, really trying to look at whether someone's looking to enjoy kayaking and those sort of activities and walking through the beautiful parks and that sort of thing, or whether someone's more interested in the food side of things, the history, the First Nations culture, and then we'll put it all together and create the best possible itinerary for you.
Because Allison, I couldn't quite get a handle on the size. So, for instance, say if somebody was doing, because, you know, you mentioned road trips, for instance, and we saw some very enticing empty roads, but how long would it take to get from place to place? You know, how big is it? How big is the province?
So if you drove straight from St. Andrew, so not including the Fundy Isles, which Phoebe and Simon have both described so beautifully, in those cases, you have to add in, you know, ferry times and things like that. But a straight drive from St. Andrews along the coast all the way to the Hopewell Rocks is about 3 hours in total. So, but of course, you're not going to drive straight through all those things. So we usually recommend, if you're going to really visit the Fundy Coast, 5 to 7 days can help you really get in there and explore. You know, if you're going whale watching, that's a half a day right there. You know, you're going to want to visit the Hopewell Rocks twice at high and low tide. So you're going to want to make time for both of those. You know, all those kinds of things. And, you know, especially with tides, you're going to have to factor in that kind of piece as well. So it's not always on your timetable. Sometimes it's on the tides.
Yeah. Simon, I was very struck that you said at one point that you had to say hello to strangers. Well, not very British, of course, at all. But yeah, how did you find it? How welcoming was it? What?
I found it just such an easy, relaxing place to be in. It was. I mean, I live in the country. You're supposed supposed to say hello, though the townies who visit don't. And nor do the fishermen when you pass on your kayak. They just give you a terrible glare. But most people say hello. But out there, it was it would have been impossibly rude not to say hello and how are you doing and have a quiet, amiable conversation. It was just, I felt like one of the oldest settlers within a couple of days.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. And did you, when you saw the whales, were you out on boats or did you get to see any from shore? I mean, I was very struck when Phoebe said about hearing.
I envy you that, Phoebe. That was great. Yeah, I didn't see any on shore. I saw them from the ferry. I saw them on a dedicated trip out from Grand Menanth when we were doing a lot of quite serious birding as well as looking for the whales. And then out of St. Andrew, there were the high speed runs, which were good fun and a good sport. And we actually did get to see fin whale on that one, which was a first for me, and that was worth a cheer.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. It's sounding better and better.
You got to go.
Oh, hello. Well, I've been to Nova Scotia, Bay of Fundy that side, but not to New Brunswick. So yes.
That's a dirty word here, Lynn. How dare you?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Phoebe.
Do both. Do a road trip. Do both. So why not? So Phoebe, obviously, you travel a lot solo and so on. Or now, of course, you'll be traveling with a baby. But yeah. What have you got any tips? Because obviously we know quite a lot of the readers do travel solo. So for somebody doing that, how was it for you? And have you got any tips around that?
Yeah, I think similar to Simon, I felt so welcomed into every place that I went to, especially because I spent 4 days on Campobello Island. I think everyone knew me by the time I left because I was very fortunate enough to, and you'll see if you look on the Wanderlust article on the website, the accommodation I stayed at, like I said, not only could you hear them, I was literally lying in my bed listening to the blows at night, but there was a little restaurant just 2 minutes walk from my door, and you could sit out on the deck, either having breakfast, lunch, or even a meal, and watch harbour porpoises breaching from whilst you were eating your food. It was just like you actually could have just stayed there the whole time and seen loads and loads of things with binoculars. That's the picture I took of Moira, was right there. And so yeah, you just get to know everyone. But I mean, Canada as a solo female traveller, I've found wonderful to travel across, and New Brunswick even more so, because it is one of those places where people really do take you under their wing. And I'm still in touch with Mackie and the boys on the whale watching, on Facebook and stuff. Like, we still message each other. It's lovely. You do feel like you're sort of adopted by New Brunswick. And my next trip there that I'm trying to plan coming out of the other side of all this is to actually go back and see my friend Claire, who I've not seen since I was in my 20s, and actually go and walk the Fundy footpath. So obviously you guys mentioned the Fundy Trail, which is the driving route, but there's a wonderful walking footpath that actually goes along the coast. It's about 40 kilometres. And we said we both go there. We've both got kids now, and we should just go walk it and camp and sort of take our time to see the coast. And so it's definitely on my to-go list again. And I think that says a lot, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Coming from you, who's so well travelled, and the Fundy footpath I hadn't even heard of before. So yet another reason to go. Sounds really good. Somebody has asked about what New Brunswick's like for cycling. So I'm going to ask Allison and Andy about that, because Andy, I even noticed in the chat box that you mentioned about, were you cycling around breweries or something, or did I just read that?
I did actually a nice little trip between the craft breweries in Fredericton, which got a little bit more windy as it went along, but it's on very safe cycle paths under lovely covered bridges around the city, and I think there were about 6 or 7 really good craft breweries between it. But that was just towny cycling.
Yeah, okay. Well, Allison, what's it like then outside of the towns? I mean, is this a good destination for cycling?
It's excellent, and it depends on what kind of cycling you want to do. So in the northern part of the province, there's a really wonderful provincial park that in the winter is a ski hill, and in the summer they actually offer lift service for a mountain bike park that was designed by Gravity Logic, who are the people that did the downhill mountain bike trails at Whistler. So it's quite challenging if you're into that kind of mountain biking. There are also lots of great mountain bike groups that have different paths throughout the province. And it's a group called Mountain Bike Atlantic. And there are some guided tours as well through a company called BRAD if you're looking to do that kind of cycling. And then there's also kind of the more leisurely cycling, kind of like what Andy did in the 120 kilometers of trails around Fredericton, or even if you're up in the Acadian Peninsula, there's almost 600 kilometers of cycling trail where you can go in and visit a bunch of different small Acadian communities, all the length of that 600 kilometer trail. So it's a really great way to get into those little tiny towns and visit them. And it goes through peat bogs and along the coast and all kinds of things like that. It's called the Velo Route. So another great way. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll mention some of these in the follow-up email when we send out the recording, because these are great tips coming out. And in fact, Allison, while I've still got you as well, somebody asked about ideas for their itinerary other than the Bay of Fundy, because obviously the Bay of Fundy, we've had those great talks tonight. We all want to go there, but what would be some of the absolute highlights?
So actually, I had kind of responded partly to it, and that's where Andy's comment about the cycling to craft breweries came from. But Fredericton is really a wonderful city to visit. It's right along a beautiful river called the Woolastook or St. John River. There's some really great Indigenous things to do, Indigenous opportunities here to interact with our Indigenous population. It's a great place for water activities as well. The St. John River is wide and calm and really great to get out on if you're into kayaking and canoeing. You can houseboat on it. And it's also the home of most of the artists and artisans in the province. And we also even have the Provincial Art Gallery here, which is called the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. They've just expanded and are reopening in 2022 with a third pavilion. And there you can see some amazing artwork that was gathered by Lord Beaverbrook and gifted to the people of New Brunswick back in the 1950s. And including, he was good friends with Salvador Dali. So we have some really unique Dali paintings, including one of his largest, Santiago El Grande, and some other amazing Canadian artists. The oldest First Nations canoe ever made, the Grandfather Canoe, is on display there as well in partnership with Sitansisk First Nation here in the city. So Fredericton's a really great spot for arts and culture lovers and for people who like to get outside on the water. If you wanted to experience our Francophone culture, then you would head more north, and there's lots of great opportunities. If you want to do that, really the time to come is mid-August. August 15th is the National Acadian holiday, and a really great time to mingle and celebrate. They have what they call the Tent Amar, which is a huge colorful parade. It's an Acadian pride parade, essentially, where they dress up in the colors of the Acadian flag and make a whole bunch of noise to reaffirm the fact that they're still here, even after, we kicked them out, basically, in the mid 1700s. So it's a really exciting time to be in the province as well.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So many ideas there. So again, we'll make sure that these are in the follow-up email. In fact, did anybody have anything to add to that? I am going to be asking you all for one recommendation in a minute, so you don't need to mention that. But have any of you got a recommendation from outside of the Bay of Fundy? Something that somebody should put in their itinerary? Or
Well, I definitely, I was lucky enough to meet an Acadian couple. Actually, they were two of the people around that fire drinking beers with me and my guide Beth. And I was absolutely fascinated. I knew very little about the Acadian culture. And just listening to their voices as well, the accent's just so unique because it's sort of French, but sort of not like any French accent you've heard before. And just having a conversation with them definitely made me want to do all the things that Allison just said, to actually go and experience and learn a bit more about that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. My guide Alain Chavette is an Acadian, and yeah, so we talked about that a great deal, and it's worth going there because it's the only place in the world where I have ever been complimented on my French accent.
So that's why you love it. That's why you love New Brunswick.
Absolutely no. I quoted
as
a
well
line
as the Wales
of a poem to Alain, and he said, "And as you say in your beautiful Parisian accented French." So yeah, it's worth going just for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, so fascinating, and I think, especially for us who know so little about the Acadian culture as well. Absolutely. I mean, I just think that, I don't know, I just keep asking myself, why don't we know more about New Brunswick? Why is it not on our radar? And it's not even that far, is it, Andy? I mean, how long? I know there's not a direct flight to New Brunswick itself, but it still doesn't take long to get there.
Yeah, even if you're flying into Halifax and then driving up, Halifax is just under 6 hours flights, and then you could get into New Brunswick in a couple of hours, unless Allison corrects me. Yeah, a couple of hours. So it's very easy, and it's very easy to do as a one province destination. A lot of people do combine it with the other Atlantic Canada provinces, but there's so much to do and so much to see in New Brunswick that you can easily spend 2 weeks plus, if that's the only time you have, filling your time there.
Yeah. Oh dear. Okay, sounds great. We are going to wind up, unfortunately. We are out of time, so which is frustrating when there's so much more we could talk about. But just to finish off then, I know this is always a difficult one, but what, for each of you, what would be the one recommendation? So, we've realised tonight it's incredible on the wildlife front. We're interested in the Acadian culture. It's got great walking, great cycling, craft beers, great wine. So much to do there. So it's very hard to narrow it down, I know. But what would be the one recommendation that each of you would give to somebody visiting? So, Allison, why don't I start with you?
Okay. So for me, one, and especially again with people with their renewed interest in, getting out into nature and exploring and things like that. For me, one of the top things to do is actually to go to Mount Carleton Provincial Park. So it's in kind of the center of the province. There's nothing around it. Your cell phone probably won't work. And it's amazing. And if you climb to the top of Mount Carleton, which makes up part of the International Appalachian Trail, and is the highest point in the Maritimes, actually, they say you can see 10 million trees. So the view's just spectacular, and it's worth the trip. So that would be my one insider tip.
Oh, that sounds incredible. Is it relatively easy to go up? We're not something we can walk up. No, we're not,
It's not a terrible mountain hike. There are other shorter mountains that are more challenging.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Simon, what would your one recommendation be?
Well, whatever you do in your life, you should make time and make place to see one of the great whales. And Bay of Fundy is one of the greatest opportunity you will do so. It really is not an experience that should be missed. And when you're there, don't worry so much about the camera. Use your eyes first, your binoculars second, and your camera, if you have one, third, because that way you will experience a whale plane.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Wise words as well. Okay, Andy, just one recommendation.
One recommendation. Well, your days are going to be packed full with amazing experiences and wildlife and nature, but I'm all about the food. So in the evening, search out some good craft beer, search out some lovely lobster rolls, some fiddleheads, and a good old DLT made from the local Dulce seaweed as well, which is a good vegetarian option against a BLT. But yeah, there's amazing food to fill you up after a really exerting day and an exerting itinerary.
Sounds better and better. Okay, Phoebe, last but not least. Oh gosh, I hope people haven't stolen your ones. What would be your one recommendation?
Do you know what? My unsurprisingly, I would say Campobello Island, because I do feel like I went there as a visitor and left as a long lost resident. And I'd say, don't overexert yourself. Don't try and pack so much in. And if I could have my time again on Campobello, I wouldn't probably have booked as many whale watching trips. I would have spent some time just sitting on that cliff top, drinking beer by the fire and speaking to the locals, because it's one of the places where you really saw that working togetherness in action. You know, you had a woman as a biologist managing to work with fishermen and mariners to get that shipping lane moved, and that wouldn't have happened if she'd have just campaigned against them. She had to learn to work with them and understand what they needed, and them to understand her. And it's the same with the US-Canada Museum that's on there, the Roosevelt House that you can go to, and it just seems to be a place where they've just kind of got that right. They just understand that working together is key, and I guess that's part of living on an island. But the fact that it's surrounded by wonderful marine life, and you can sit there and listen to it over a beer, just makes it, for me, one of the best places I could ever recommend.
Oh, I want to rush out now. Andy, I need to book my ticket.
No problem.
Okay, sounds brilliant. Well, thank you so much, guys. That was so interesting. And learned so much myself there as well. Absolutely fascinating. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And we will be sending out the recording of the event and some of the questions that were asked and some of the place names and topics that were covered. So do look out for that coming into your inbox. Thanks again to our great speakers, and see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.